The story begins with the fact that everything is familiar to ordinary inhabitants can suddenly disappear at only one moment. Once a crack and monsters from another world appeared in the sky, which were later called that, penetrated the human world. People could not close that heavenly crack, and therefore the monsters arranged a whole massacre. Even military forces were not able to help, because of which the world delved into great despair. But everything continued until Awakened on Earth appeared. Thanks to their unusual forces, they became the main hope in the struggle against the disaster. People called them heroes. At that time, many buildings were injured in which civilians and their families had previously lived. People had to look for shelters, and at any moment they could lose their own lives because of the shelling that always embarrassed. The view of each monster was special, and not one of them was repeated. However, everyone knew that they were real monsters. The psyche of children was injured from birth due to the fact that they had to see the incomprehensible creatures that destroyed humanity at that age. It was impossible to hide from them, because the monsters could find in any refuge and immediately kill. But unexpectedly for the population of the planet, people appeared who could stand up for them and stand right in front of the dangerous monster. One of their representatives appeared right at the moment when a tragic disaster could occur, and the monster would have killed a small child. He immediately returned to the creation, and taking out a sharp spear already directed it to fulfill his defender's mission. This gave a little time for a frightened woman to take her newborn son and quickly leave this place in search of safety. But the monster did not calm down. He also tried to defend his right to the power of this world, so he just did not give up. The defender tried to use special skills in order to prevent the monster from winning and picking up another life. But the creation turned out to be stronger, so in one movement he threw a young guy right into the wall of the house. From the injury received, the guy began to cough with blood and felt bad, despite the fact that he was already used to fights. Soon, he gradually began to lose consciousness due to loss of blood and closed his eyes from exhausting. But suddenly his gaze changed when right in front of his face, he saw a huge mouth of a monster with sharp teeth. The young man had already managed to say goodbye to his own life. But suddenly another guy appeared, whom the monster did not have time to notice. The stranger managed to cut off the long neck of the monster in one movement, which was like the dragon with its sizes and wings. However, on one murdered creation, everything did not end, since a dozen more like vital in the air above the ground. However, the defenders became more and more, so they could cope, and mercilessly went to defend humanity. Some managed to put their hands into the bodies of monsters with their own hands, and pull their hearts out of the chest. After a long battle, one of the defenders confidently said that this had ended, and they won. The man owned incredible techniques, so in the end he managed to light a special bonfire and get to the enemy. As it turned out, his name was Kanda Commander. Therefore, after his enchanting victory, people endlessly thanked for this. The little boys who watched the battle immediately said that they want to become the same real heroes as the commander. He was the youngest commander in the history of the heroes who owned the lightning forces. His name was the Star of Hope for people thanks to his unusual forces. He also had his deputy named Rick Darren. He had a special force, was young, but always calm and collected. And the third in the team of the heroes was Sakum Retz, who had a force of fire and a rather rude character, for which he often received dissatisfied comments from others. Among the crowd of people was also a young guy who was sure that he would once accurately master such forces and become a hero. Many people died because of the monsters, and someone needed an ambulance to bandage the wounded body participants. Soon, the doctor Shiraisha Shio arrived and turned to the injured guy said that the poison of the coil of that tribe is very dangerous, and even when contacting him you can be poisoned. But she was ready for such an occasion on the road, so she prepared a syringe with an antidote to help everyone. However, suddenly the guy's calm was interrupted by the phrase that he was the same weakness who decided to try to attack the monster. As it turned out, Rick Darren and his partner Sakum Retsu came up, who asked the stranger not to waste their time and leave attempts to attract their attention. In addition, they did not want someone like a simple person to become a hero and consider it a terrible prospect. In addition, Sakuma Retsu had his own grievances against the father of the young man, who according to him, would be able to wash away from his father's shame. The heroes called the father of the victim a traitor, but his son did not think so and wanted to defend his own. But the heroes recognized by everyone did not hold back emotions and hands, so one of them hit the young man in the face with his fist, with the words that he should understand who he was talking to. From the blow received, the guy flew away again and received several more superficial wounds from concrete. According to Sakum, the young man's father betrayed his comrades when they had a mission, and after that he moved into another world. Therefore, not given the features and details of the situation of the then situation, They confidently claimed that the old man was a scum. His son had nothing to say as evidence, but he knew for sure that his father would never betray humanity and fought to the last. But the current heroes were not going to listen to him and continued to apply physical strength in order to show their authority. Suddenly, Sakuma decided to become a foot on his chest to the young man, thereby blocking him free access to oxygen. The guy was painful, but the so-called hero did not want to stop and was even more annoyed from a compassionate gaze. Therefore, he soon changed his tactics of bullying and told the wounded that he would become and demonstrate his strength. But Ratsu was sure that in several movements he would erase the guy from the face of the earth and would not leave a wet place. Without a choice, the young man rushed at his enemy and was ready to really join the battle in order to finally end the mockery. But Sakuma did not want to spend his own energy, so with one movement of the fingers he was able to cause a fiery blow. After the guy once again suffered from the fire, the hero began to laugh and could not believe that someone really decided to rush at him. Due to screams and evil laughter, Shiraisha Shio quickly came, who only finished dressings with other victims, as one of the patients was now also with burns. The girl rushed to the rescue and told the defenders that they could not force the guy to be responsible for the actions of his father. The so-called heroes did not like that someone decided to intervene in their disassembly, but they could not go against the girl. But something strange began to happen with the affected guy. From felt how much his heart increased and began to fight stronger. It seemed that something terrible would happen, but everything was quite quiet around and without monsters. However, the body of the young man was covered with unknown cracks, and the gaze was like a hungry wolf that felt prey. At that moment, the Dr. Shiraisha realized that her antidote did not manage to act, and the poison itself began to activate. After all, when the guy hit the wall of the house from behind the monster, sharp stones with poison stuck in his back, the doctor had another thing that could save the young man from death and strong suffering, which were now in his body. But as soon as she took out an ampule with the infusions of healing herbs, someone suddenly ordered her to stop. As it turned out, it was Kandayu, who asked the girl not to use the potion from this state. Then Kandayu pointed to another victim and asked Shiraisha to look after him and render first aid. The girl did not want to leave the injured young man, as she saw the state in what condition he was now. However, the commander looked pretty sweet and said that he could be relying on him, so he will help here himself. The doctor felt something was wrong, but she could not leave another patient and had to go to the rescue. Therefore, leaving the stranger to the team of the heroes, she hoped that they would not wake up and really look. The guy felt bad. The knees of his second were accompanied by terrible pain, as if something new was growing in the body. He understood that he had to take medicines as soon as possible, so he tried to reach out to them. Laudable. Us pick up this fresh point. A hobbit and moldish. Which here did map. Oh yeah, what. Soon their service dog came running, which, according to the owner, was also injured. It seemed that the animal was poisoned, but the antidote remained only one, and trying to delay the time to mock the guy, the team commander pretended to be, they say sincerely, did not understand who to save him. At some point, Sakum Retz spoke to his partner and said that in his opinion, the choice obviously falls on the dog, saying that he would be more useful for them in battle. And Rick Darren supported him and noticed that a few minutes ago, the guy behaved like a hero, and now he was ready to let the dog die. Then Kandayu got up from his knees and summed up the results that everyone was holding the same opinion regarding the choice of the victim. After that, he lifted the test tube with the medicine and revealed it indicatively right in front of the guy, who was dying of pain. Then he looked angrily at him and began to pour the contents of the tube to the ground, but so that the victim would not reach it. The liquid proceeded in the face of the guy, but he could not do anything but hope for some kind of miracle. And the sick dog, meanwhile, did not understand what exactly was poured in front of his nose, so the unknown substance decided to smell at first. The boy was trembling and could not master his own body, which gradually died of a terrible poison. And the dog's behavior has changed. Her body suddenly began to shake, and the muscles were involuntarily reduced. He turned back to the puddle, which was filled with medicines and continuously barking right into the sky. But suddenly, instead of some miracle, he simply fulfilled his biological need and returned to the usual state again. The young man watched this and could not restrain his tears. He was offended that with the only test tube of the drugs that could help him, did so. And Kandayu was more worried about the dog's question. because now he realized that the animal was not poisoned and simply wanted to the toilet. Suddenly, a humiliated guy could not stand it and asked the commander why they treat him so disgusting. In addition, in fact, he did nothing bad and only tried to help save the world from monsters. Then Kanda came closer to him and quietly said that he treats everyone so, who is so miserable. According to him, the son of the traitor should be quieter in water and below the grass. And instead, he tries to become a hero. The commander was sure that the existence of a guy was a big mistake, because he was sick of one species. After that, he again hit the stranger in his neck with his foot and threw him on the solid ground. He further continued to humiliate him and said that such a garbage was not a place on earth, so he needs to be removed. And if he does not see the young man on the list of victims, he will be considered a traitor as his father. After his last words, Kanda ordered the team not to let anyone in this place and report that the monsters are there. Rick Darren himself was delighted that now no one else would interfere with him and stand daily in the way. When the whole team left the guy, he still tried not to give up and crawl on to try to drink a poured medicine. He still managed to get to his feet, but the muscles did not obey and the whole body was trembling very much, passing the pain. Therefore, having made at least half a step, the young man again fell to the ground with his face directly in the puddle that the dog noticed. It was difficult for him to understand what he did bad and what he deserved such an attitude when he simply tried to save people. And now, lying in the dirty earth and being humiliated, he had to die from the poison of the monster. He knew that he had made every effort to earn at least some respect, but this was still not enough for such a hard world. But expecting his death, the guy began to feel as if some silhouette appeared behind him. It was quite difficult to discern it, as the poison greatly reduced the opportunity to see and focus attention. But he still did not leave an attempt to at least speak with an unfamiliar object that overshadowed his consciousness. At some point, the victim came to the conclusion that behind him there was a real monster with big horns. The silhouette was all red and it was even difficult to discern the floor of the monster. But now it did not matter to the guy. After all, being in such a critical state, he could not defeat even the weakest monster. Suddenly he remembered his teacher that he could become a wonderful writer when he grows up, because he once won a good essay on the topic of the hero's father. But in childhood, the student did not want to become a writer, but to be a real hero, like his father. At that moment, Dad was very delighted with the words heard, and taking his son in his arms, said that this was definitely his child. However, once, defenders came to the house of his family and reported that Ren Haneda, namely his father, betrayed heroes and people. So all the property confiscated and the family should leave the house. Now the young man and his mother were difficult with money. Besides, the woman began to get sick very much recently. But before leaving this world, she ordered her son to find out how everything was actually and who framed their father. Now, being so close to death, he could not give the promise of his mother and so easy to die. Therefore, he quickly began to recover and did not allow his poisoned body to manage his further fate. The demoness, which appeared in the image of a beautiful woman behind the guy, was very surprised that he managed to move again. Moreover, the son of a famous Kanyeda was able to stand on his feet despite the fact that they trembled as if from the cold. Then he rushed at the monster and took out his sharp sword, which was used as the only weapon. Then Lu did not think about how it could be difficult for him in the next minutes, because now it was the goal of defending his own. But he did not take into account the fact that the demoness at which he rushed will be much stronger than him and will not leave a chance for life. The woman did not play with the guy, so she inflicted her strong blow to him, which resembled a strong sound wave. At one point, Lu threw a few tens of meters, as if he were a football butcher who was thrown across the field. He could not get to his feet, so he had to completely take a blow and fall to the ground, rolling several meters. It was difficult for him to get to his feet again. The body continued to gradually die since there was no more antidote. At some point, the guy realized that he was in front of the 5th level monster, which means it was strange that she went down to the ground. Previously, the monsters were all weak, and with certain skills it was possible to overcome them. But the presence of such a strong monster resembled a wasteland. But now there was no something to do except to fight on his own. So the young man was again going with strength and thoughts. However, the woman had terrible power for humanity, so Lu was really like garbage for her, which she would easily win. Therefore, without wasting time, she independently rushed to the guy, who was almost at death. As soon as she was nearby, she swung very much and was ready to deliver a decisive blow in this battle. And not sparing energy, she nevertheless hit Lu with her hand on the head so as no one else could have done on this earth. After the damage received, the young man seemed to begin to watch this world from the side. It was difficult for him to realize what was happening. But at some point, he simply lay motionless under the feet of the real Queen of Demons, and could not do anything. Meanwhile, the monster looked at the miserable body of a person with a low rank who could not withstand even such an attack. However, most of all, she appreciated the power of mortals, which for her was something unknown and special. Now Lu had been lying for several minutes and did not take a single breath, which testified to his complete death on this earth. Then the demoness sat closer to the guy, and at one point extended a hand closer to his head, on which there was a leather glove. She had to close her eyes on the dead body of the young man who were open during his last breath. But after the woman touched his body, Lu seemed to begin to fall underground and was in a completely different space. Around him was an unknown blue energy, from afar resembling the endless cosmos in which he slept. Now, there was not a single scratch on his body, but only the shadow of the demoness and its horns, as if enveloping the human being. It is not known how much time the journey lasted in unknown space. But suddenly La still opened his eyes again. Now he was in an unfamiliar bedroom, where there was no furniture except the bed on which he actually slept. The guy needed time to restore his breath, which was shot down as if after a long run. He tried to understand exactly where it was, because until recently, he seemed to be at death near the destroyed square. After which he looked at his hands and remembered the monster, whom he saw for the last time before closing his eyes. Then he carefully placed his legs on the floor and, feeling the support, realized that he was still alive, and something unknown around him. Then he began to speak quietly, and asked if there was someone else in the room, since he has important things and should leave. From the jewelry in the room there were big horns that hung on the wall and evoked strange thoughts into the head of the guy. But at some point he saw a mirror where his reflection was. However, now he looked completely different. His physique became stronger, and horns also appeared, the same as monsters with a high rank of strength. But suddenly the same demoness entered the room, which he last saw on the ground through the pain in his eyes. The woman was not alone, and informed her cohabitant that apparently the merger took place quite successfully. Lu could not restrain aggression, so when he saw his new reflection, he immediately broke the mirror and refused to believe in the truth. Now in his hands there was a lot of strength, unlike his condition during the last battle with the monster. The whole room was in small pieces of the mirror, and in the reflection of one of them Lu could see himself again. It was difficult for him to perceive so much lately, and especially to believe that now he has become a monster. He wanted to hear answers to all his questions, so two monsters were just entering his new chambers. The guy drew attention to the demoness, and was able to recognize her by bright red clothes and an elegant silhouette. Now his appearance was rather unusual and courageous. The features of the teenager have changed to sharp corners and facial shape. He tried to carefully see the monster in front of him, and remember everything in detail from their last meeting. Therefore, remembering how he received one of the most powerful blows in his life from this woman, he grabbed the bat. Then, not thinking about the consequences, he rushed at two monsters standing with him in the same room and wanted to end them. At first he sought to deal with the one who turned him into a similar creature and find out the whole truth. But next to her, there was always another lady who correctly served as a guard for her mistress and had to defend her. And this case was no exception. So the girl immediately rushed into battle and hit Lu in the stomach. Then the man fell to the ground and painfully hit his head on the floor, with which he had to face on the ground. Suddenly, a girl unfamiliar for him sat on top and said that he had no right to speak to the princess. Now for Lu, everything has become even more confusing, and besides, he again had to endure physical mockery. He looked into the eyes of the demoness and could not believe what was now lying at the feet of a real princess. Such behavior was really considered inappropriate in this place. So Lu should now get used to the new rules. Then the demoness exhaled and introduced herself as the princess of the devilish tribe, which the military called the First. But for the woman it was a miracle that someone might not know her and so disrespectfully during a personal meeting. However, soon she realized that the guy did not participate in difficult places, and on the ground was a low-ranking soldier. Then the guard spoke to him and said that if the princess had not moved his soul, then he would have finally died. Lu still could not recover and accept his new body. Besides, now he learned about the movement of the soul. So now, judging by history, he made certain conclusions. There were 4 types of monsters, namely from the devilish tribe, from flying, from terrible and armored. The flying tribe differed in that during its flight, the creatures managed to throw away their own poison, whereas representatives of the terrible tribe possessed extraordinary force, which was not inherent in others. As for the armored monsters, they had a large driving force and had excellent defense skills of themselves and territories. And the tribe of the devils was most like people. although their abilities are not so simple. Some participants in the Devil's Tribe had special mental abilities, and representatives with a high rank can extract their souls from bodies. Therefore, understanding all this, Lu came to the conclusion that his soul was moved to the body of a demon of another world. After that, he tried to calm down, and in attempts to restore the balance of the body to understand more and more in detail, suddenly, the first spoke to him and said that the poison of a flying flame is operating quickly. Even if it enters the body of the elephant, it will be poisoned in 10 minutes. And judging by the experience, the woman suspected that the real body of the guy was already probably disposed of. Lu could not believe her words that seemed nothing more than a terrible fairy tale. However, in fact, on Earth they quickly dealt with the bodies of those who died during the next attack of monsters. The young man refused to accept reality, although he himself knew well how problematic with the burial of hundreds of bodies from the beginning of hell on Earth. Therefore, understanding reality, he almost fell to the floor from the shock and sadness of everything that happened to him. And the assistant of the princess heard that people created robots in order to remove panties from the battlefield, and some of them were arranged flamethrowers, after which only ash remained. The first would not mind seeing this action with her own eyes. She was interested to know about new technologies, but Lu became unpleasant due to the fact that he could now happen to his dead body, so he asked to do this without his participation. Then the princess reported that in fact, she was not interested in what exactly is happening with the old body of the guy. After all, now he had to get used to the new as soon as possible. Suddenly, the emotions and expression on Lu's face changed, and he ordered the woman to shut up. Then he got to his feet and said that he was not a slave, so he would no longer follow someone's orders, moreover, one of the monsters. He still felt like an ordinary person who seeks to protect the world and humanity from invaders. In addition, he did not know why he did this, and suspected that it was a trap to find out what exactly was happening on the side of people. And that moment the princess did not answer him, and waited for him to make a new member of their tribe to demonstrate force. Lu began to knead his hands, and directly said that the first was not lucky with him, since he was not going to just give up. Now, he was ready to die again, but in any case, not to stay in the body of a real monster. For a subordinate princess, this behavior was incomprehensible, and she waited for the guy to calm down. But it seems Lu was not going to do this, so the girl again had to apply physical strength against him. At one point, she managed to fall into the head, almost without making any special efforts for the sight. After Lu was neutralized, she delivered another blow to her stomach with his fist, because of which he flew away. She could not tolerate so that the young man, so weak against her, continued to show her character. Because even if he has a devilish body, this does not mean that such a weakness can be in their tribe. And that moment Lu was angry even more, because he was also not going to endure humiliating words in his direction. Suddenly, he managed to redirect his anger into a special stream of energy, which poured right from his hands. In an instant, he became extremely strong and quickly hit his opponent, which she certainly did not expect. The girl flew off almost a dozen meters around the room and ended up in the wall, where she left a deep hole from the blow with her body. Blood came from her mouth, but despite this, she quickly recovered from such a strong attack. Meanwhile, Lu could not recover. He himself did not expect such powerful opportunities from his new body. Blue energy was still circulating in his hands, and all the muscles were ready to continue the fight. Then the girl looked at him and realized that we were talking about the power of the devilish tribe. The first one looked at the new family member, and could not realize how a common person could have such a power. After all, she was directly connected with the soul. Lu was difficult to understand what his body permeates for energy, since the sensations were completely new to him. Now the princess came up with the idea of how exactly the mod-on would check the authenticity of the soul belonging to the tribe. Therefore, in an instant, while Lu was looking at her hands, she rushed from a place right at the guy. Then, being very close to him, she put up her hand and was ready to hit him on the head, which she actually did without unnecessary thoughts. The strength of the first was hundreds of times more than the new power of Lu, so he could not react to the attack in time. Having flew the whole room, he again fell to the floor, and now his body was permeated by the mighty power of the princess. But the woman decided not to stop at the start, and quickly ended up near the body of the young man. Then I decided not to give him a chance to get to his feet, and sat on her stomach without questions on her stomach, holding her arms over her chest. The first sat for a long time turning to Lu and was not going to get up. She dug into his neck like a wild cat and did not let go. It was difficult for the guy to breathe. He tried to accept the hand of the demoness, but everything was in vain against her strength. Now the seconds for him lasted endlessly because again, there was a feeling of imminent death due to suffocation. The worst thing is that the energy from the princess flooded his body and the muscles did not obey at all, so the limbs were not subject to. Previously, he never felt the devilish energy until this moment. But now she pressed directly. But suddenly the princess's behavior changed and she, as if in a moment, switched to something else. Suddenly and quickly she got up from the guy and took up her clothes. She always had a beautiful decoration on her neck, which she now wanted to remove. Then suddenly took off the cloak, which was the only clothes on the upper part of the demoness's body, and tied around the neck. Lu did not understand what was happening, because the woman was again on top of him, and did not allow him to breathe freely. Suddenly she grabbed the blanket, which lay nearby on the bed, and decided to hide herself and Lu under him. Meanwhile, a strange plant began to appear in the courtyard, which also extracted special energy, and grew quite quickly. Quite managed to carefully squeeze through the doors that were in Lu's chambers and continue the search. But suddenly Anna the white flower quickly bloomed and turned into a human eye, which looked shocked. The Quit managed to spy on the moment when the demoness sat on top of the man and did not pay attention to extraneous sounds. However, on the chambers of her mistress, there was always a girl as a guard, who in time noticed a cunning plant and interrupted her surveillance. Grabbing the plant by the trunk, the girl quickly grabbed it from the door and pulled it over. After the flower was left without a nourishment, he sharply began to dry out and lose his special opportunities. But the girl was not enough, and she wanted to kill the plant in order to accurately provide peace for the princess. Therefore, then she took the barrel in 2 hands and tore it into 2 large parts. Meanwhile, the behavior of the princess herself was still strange, and she nevertheless drew attention to extraneous sounds outside the chambers. But she did not want to be distracted from the time she could spend with Lu, so she wanted to continue to fulfill her idea. Although the guy was scared, he still enjoyed the appearance of the demoness, which was inherent in all representatives of this tribe. He had never met more beautiful women before, but now he forbade himself these thoughts, because he still considered himself a man, and her monster. Therefore, now he tried to scout what the girl was going to do with him, and how he could not fall into the trap. Then he suspected that the demoness could mock him in order to find out more information about the human world. Considering more carefully, it was the impression that the first wants to suck all the energy of a young guy. The same demoness did not say anything, and with every second her face became closer to Lu's head. Suddenly he felt sad that his first kiss took place after his death, besides with a representative of the monsters. However, he soon turned off the stream of thoughts and tried to enjoy the moment, despite all the pitfalls. After the end of the time from the first, Lu noticed that a strange object appeared on his nose that was not like anything. He looked pretty vile, so Lu immediately threw him off his face and wanted to trample his foot as soon as possible. But at that moment, the princess intervened and explained that this creature is the eye of a mandala, which is pursuing and following everywhere. His gaze always looked rather strange, since the eye was separated from the body, which gave him such a color. Then Lu decided to ask, is it really thanks to this plant that someone could see what is happening in every corner of the house? At that moment, the guard intervened and explained that there are still people who are embarrassed by the fate of Shura, although several of them fled. The princess dressed and said that Shura, this is the owner of the body in which the Lu's soul now lives. Moreover, he is her groom. Now the guy had even more questions and he wanted to learn more about Shura. As it turned out, it was assumed that on this day a man should marry the princess and officially consolidate their marriage. But Shura unexpectedly disappeared, and by the time he found him, he had already died. The woman saw the body of a dead groom in the thicket and did not know who killed him, or why exactly there. But despite her deep despair and experiences, she still knew something. Namely, that deep wounds on the body of a man were definitely not made by people. These words were simultaneously frightened and reassured Lu. He was glad that such responsibility was not in public. But now the question was about a strong monster. The princess said that the devilish tribe always puts itself above all. Even the royal family was no exception. And now Lu had to become stronger in his new body than his previous owner, so that he would not be killed for the second time. Shura was the strongest warrior of their tribe. So if his body is not, the princess will become a new target. The guy understood that in order to maintain the death of her husband in secret, the bride had to move the living soul into his body. His theory was correct. Besides, the princess did not see anything bad in her act, since Lu had previously almost killed. Suddenly, the guy had an insight that he was really given a second chance for life, and the girl guard regretted that it was the soul of Lu who became a new soul. In her opinion, the young man was rather slow, but the only dead at that time, so there was no other choice. Suddenly, the guy began to hurt a lot, and as if again tearing his body from the inside. As then, on Earth, the princess leaned closer and was ready to help, but had her own conditions for salvation. Lu had a choice, either dines to the poem of the devils and help the first, or to die again and no longer have a chance for revival. It was difficult for a young man to make a choice, because now the question of his life was at stake. The princess decided to help the guy with a choice, so she handed him her tablet with certain information. Lu was not familiar with such devices, so he asked the woman what it was. Then on the tablet, a direct broadcast from the ground began, namely, the performance of the heroes who overcome the monsters in the battle and defended human honor was shown. And now they officially wanted to award them medals for such an achievement and a breakthrough in the war against the monsters. First, the name of the captain sounded, namely Kanda Yu. For an excellent command in this battle, he received a first-class medal. After the proclamation, the so-called hero went to the stage and was ready to make his own speech. The fighter was well-dressed and corresponded to a typical description of a real hero. The officer took out a real medal that looked worthy and shone in the sun, because it was made of real gold. The man turned the case and took the award, immediately attached it to the hero's strong chest. After that, the men gave each other honor for decent work and good work between departments, and the whole crowd was happy about this choice and was not surprised, because Kanda was a real hero for them, who sincerely helped people. After the award ceremony, some of those present began to demolish flowers to the hands of their hero, and the first boy came out the first. This baby and his mother Kanda recently saved from one of the monsters, allowing the family to escape. The young man looked into the eyes of his hero and enthusiastically said that when he grows up, he certainly wants to become like Y. Then other team members intervened in the conversation and said that the guy was still small to think about this. Then the schoolboy turned to them and said that he was not a child and quite strong, so do not argue with him. For the crowd, his words were not serious, so people were pleased with such confidence and waited for the continuation. At that moment, Kanda picked up the baby, which gave him authority and respect from the audience, after which he thanked people for that 8 hryvnias. They trust the heroes to fight monsters, because to protect humanity is their duty, and they will wait for the day when younger people come and will fulfill their duties with the same force. After all, choosing this path means sacrificing yourself. So it is worth remembering this before deciding to become a hero. Because in this war, the heroes are only weapons and a shield that protects people. Standing in front of the enemy, they experience fear of death, and try not to involve civilians in this. After which Kanda paused and confidently said that they would not forgive traitors. The crowd supported every word of the commander, and began to proclaim words regarding traitors whom they will not forgive. At that moment, Lu felt terribly. It was painful for him to watch. Even after death, he is remembered as a traitor. But after the end of the direct broadcast, everyone was sent a message about the search for a former traitor, where there was a photo of a young man. His hands began to tremble unexpectedly, and he almost broke the tablet from a hassle. Then, more than ever, he was furious for every word uttered by Kanda in relation to him and the late father. Suddenly, the princess spoke to him, and said that he did not have to join their tribe. But no one would say thanks to him, because living with the mark of the traitor is difficult. In addition, it was rather stupid to die, not trying to change the situation. Lu absolutely agreed with the words of the devil, which annoyed him even more, since he used to consider her a real monster. However, the worst of all was to recall his family, which had to go through the terrible hell of shame and live with the stigma of traitors. Lu passed a lot of humiliations from the so-called heroes who did not even seek to understand the situation of his family, but simply believed in gossip. Therefore, now the guy was sure that he could not just die, despite the surrounding circumstances. Now he only wanted ruthless revenge for Kanda Yu, who was supposed to get all twice as much. The princess was pleased that she still managed to persuade her husband to stay with her and direct him on the right path. Therefore, without hesitation, she provided the desired clothes for Lu to look in accordance with the strongest fighter in the tribe. The guy looked great and corresponded to the girl who walked next to him. As soon as they went outside, there was a huge dragon that recently fell asleep. He also had quite large wings, and outwardly he resembled the very monster that recently appeared on the human planet. Then Lu extended his hand to the creation and asked, "Is it really a transport to move members of the devil tribe?" Suddenly, the dragon woke up from the sound heard in his direction, and opening a huge mouth rushed at the guy. Then the princess immediately stood up for Lu, who knew how to treat such animals correctly. To do this, there was a little devilish spell, which the woman possessed well. She managed to concentrate her energy in her hand, after which she extended it to the dragon, and he calmed down. Then the first explained that this dragon was almost a child of Shura, and since Lu was in his body and had a human soul, this caused an incomprehensible sensation in the animal. The princess knew what to do, so she suddenly squeezed the accumulated energy in her hand, and after she opened, she had a purple ring in her palms, which in color corresponded to Shura's energy. The girl gave the jewelry of Lu and said that he would use it, and this would help him hide the human smell. Soon, the subordinate princess came up and brought the necessary papers on which there was all the information about Shura. Now Lu had to study this all before they arrived in the palace. There were quite a few papers and letters that it was even difficult for a guy to hold them in his hands. He understood that there is too much information, so he could not read and remember everything so quickly. But this did not bother anyone. According to the girl, he could not remember this, if so much did not want to. But suddenly the princess intervened and said that if Lu makes at least one mistake in the palace, he would regret it a lot, because in the end she personally will suffer, because of which the guy will kill the guy with his own hand. Lu had nothing to answer, so he had to start studying everything about the first owner of his body as soon as possible. Hiding their personal human smell, Lu and the princess went on a short excursion for the new member of the tribe. The guy managed to touch the dragon, although he personally did not dare to manage him personally and entrusted this work to a more experienced person. When the team rose into the sky, the young man was surprised from the world what he saw under his feet. The city seemed rather quiet and resembled a typical village with a good bazaar in the square, where everyone was going. Previously, Lu was sure that monsters live like real barbarians, so they are not inherent in the concept of peace. However, representatives of this tribe calmly walked on a summer day and talked among themselves, like real people. On the square there was even a bar with craft beer, which was nowhere else to find in other cities. And the dragons flying over the city were ready to give freshly baked buns that animals loved so much. Lu was difficult to come to terms with the current reality, so he needed time to recover and get used to it. At that moment, the princess turned to him and said that this world is about the same as the one where the guy had lived before. Therefore, he will quickly master local traditions. But since he was always sure that in the world of monsters the opposite is true, he still asked the first why they were so similar. In addition, morality and laws are inherent in people. They help each other, and according to the young man, the monsters only kill and steal. In this world there were even similar things, like technology, so he was sure that some objects also stole. Then a girlfriend turned to him and explained that these were their military trophies. She even allowed Lu to take something from what she saw if he would miss the house like that. The guy was not surprised at what he heard and said that in the end, thieves still really think as they should. The princess had nothing to say. She understood the sadness of the new member of their tribe, but now she also needed his help. Suddenly the girl's gaze sharpened and she stubbornly looked forward, which caused strange feelings among others. As it turned out, she managed to see terrible red insects that appeared right in front of them and flew on the attack. They looked like wild mosquitoes, which became more and more. So in a matter of seconds, there was already a whole cloud. Lu tried to cover his face from annoying insects, which without stopping tried to attack monsters and a dragon. At that moment, the princess again began to defend, because it was not the first time that she fell into a similar situation. She managed to create a special field of energy, which, like an arrow, flew right on insects. Lu tried to find out exactly which creatures surrounded them, and what their aggressive behavior is due. Then the first explained that these are blind people who are born and live in the abyss. If you get their bite, then the pain will last up to several days. Therefore, now it was worth lowering the flight and drowning a little dragon to get around the cloud of biting insects. And that moment the dragon heard the order, and being dissatisfied with the situation with the blinds, he still had to change the route. Now the large animal was heading right to the bottom, and the monsters on it freely kept their feet. Lu tried to see where exactly they were heading and felt a change in air around. Then the smell and quality of the same air changed dramatically, which caused severe discomfort during breathing. The princess saw the guy's displeased face and explained that harmful evaporation is to blame. When the clouds disappeared from the horizon, Lu saw like a purple sea, which was boiling with incomprehensible smoke. Strange things happened in the water. Many marine residents mercilessly destroyed each other and had a terrible look. Lud had not seen such creatures before, because even ordinary fish looked terrible there. But the impression was created that this sea has no boundaries and merges into one whole with the sky along which dragons flew. At that moment, the guy seemed to understand that it was the strange in this world that distinguishes him from the human land. The problem was in the abyss itself. It was a place where the seas intersect with each other and create one whole. The princess heard the words of the young man and did not understand what laws he was talking about, because she lived according to other rules for survival. And the first and basic law was that stronger wins the weaker, and the water in the abyss is poisonous, and therefore distinguishes harmful vapors. They are absorbed into the ground and air. Therefore, given such conditions, none of the weak could survive there and died in the very first seconds of his stay. Because of this, the tribe of the devils cannot sow the fields or breed cattle, because it does not have the appropriate resource, so they are forced to steal. At that moment, Lu looked under his feet again and saw a terrible sea monster with a huge mouth and sharp teeth. Now he definitely remembered the words that only the strongest could survive in this place, and for the weak, such as he was once, there was only death, which he also had to survive, and it was these words that were the main law of the tribe of demons, which they always adhered to. Human soldiers have already tried to invade this world, but died of poisoning. All attempts ended, and Lu was interesting. That was what became the main reason. But he did not voice his question to the princess, because he did not want to raise this topic with her. Suddenly, he thought about the fact that he had a rather real chance to leave this place and return home. Therefore, he was already ready to speak to the first and distract her, then to disappear quietly, but suddenly changed his mind. He still did not have enough information, so there was a great risk. And besides, even if he succeeds, no one will believe. Kanda Yu will try to kill his enemy again. Suddenly, the princess turned to Lu and asked what he had so worried about. Then she smiled and said that soon they would be at the depths of the abyss, so it should be more careful. The dragon suddenly increased its speed, and they rushed over the water so much that it was impossible to make out the bottom. The flow of wind almost knocked out Lu, who was not used to this and could not stand on his feet normally, and the huge winged animal did not stop and sought to leave this place as soon as possible. Due to the high speed of movement, something strange was happening with the face of Lu, because the wind doused his skin, and his mouth was inflated in different directions. Once he almost fell and managed to grab the dragon in time, otherwise he risked being in poisonous reservoirs. However, the dragon again changed the trajectory of movement, and seemed to fall to the ground, because of which Lu was very scared. It seemed to him that in seconds he and other passengers would turn into one continuous cake. Due to his inability to fly on a dragon, during the landing of the guy still fell from a large animal to the ground. After such flights, he was suddenly in a conditioned, as the movement changed all the time and heavily motionless. After that, he exhaustedly lay down on the ground, and extending his hand to the sky, tried to recover and see who around him. But at that moment the princess was nearby, whom the young man with a tangent consciousness took for his late grandmother. The girl became unpleasant due to the fact that she was mistaken for the old woman, so she mercilessly hit Lu with a good slap in the face. From the blow received, the guy again wrote his face on the ground and left the dust and sand barrel behind him. In addition, now there were horns on his head inherent in all members of the devil's tribe, which also had to be used too. Lu was all in scratches and absolutely exhausted, so he tried to at least somehow ask for help. But as soon as he opened his eyes, he saw in front of him the palace of the devilish tribe, which looked so powerful. The princess did not want to spend time talking and noticed that there were 3 more large flying dragons near the palace, who had already rested at that moment. Apparently, this said that all the other generals also arrived at the gathering place and left their animals on the street. Suddenly, the subordinate spoke and said that the 3 generals were quite strong and ambitious to compete with the princess for the throne, because it was they who figured out the eye of the mandala. Then the girl turned to Lu, and with a reproach asked if the guy read all the papers that she gave him at the beginning of the flight. But when the young man began to hesitate with the answer, she was very angry and did not even want to hear that the guy could forget about this order. After which she took out a knife and emphasized that the deceit of the king of demons is the white sin. So if Lu at least begins to make mistakes a little, she would kill him in place to protect the princess. At that moment, Lu recalled that they were allies. But in case of such distrust, they can be killed right now. The guy managed to carry out his manipulation, so Xiao took his intentions quite serious and calmed down. The princess did not interfere in their showdown, but she needed a good result of negotiations with the generals. Therefore, in order not to waste time and energy on quarrels, she asked the subordinate to be quieter and listen to her. Then the girl again emphasized the importance of the result and asked Lu, despite her own confidence, to be careful. The guy cooled a little, and the fear of death gave way to a sense of responsibility for some important mission, which he himself really knew nothing. Then he decided to boast a little and said that during his military service, some called him very smart, and although in school times he did not have any features and abilities, His duty was to analyze the enemy as fast as someone else could not do. Therefore, spending many hours of his childhood on the internet, the guy managed to develop the skill of finding the weaknesses of the enemy, and the constant analysis of the monsters was his children's task, which he tried to solve anywhere. Therefore, now being an adult and powerful, he knew quite a bit about details in this matter. This gave him even greater confidence in his actions. So the guy independently went to the hospital and contacted the girls, asked them not to doubt it. However, in a matter of seconds, the expression on his face suddenly changed, and the young man no longer went forward so confidently, but was waiting for the princess. After all, when he opened the door to the palace, he felt underground silence and saw a large number of monsters inside. All those present had similar demonic signs in appearance, and inspired the fear of Lu, who was accustomed to consider such creatures by monsters. The guy was very scared, but now he was not how to run away, because he was responsible for the future of the princess. The girl turned to him and tried to cheer up. Then she confidently ordered to go forward and not give up. The first corresponded to his nickname and walked ahead, but Lu did not know her real name. Suddenly, other monsters began to discuss the image of Shura, the god of death, in whose body there was a young man. Now he was a real rival for many men of this world. Lu did not have time to recover from so many present, when he suddenly drew attention to the sharp sound nearby. At that moment, he saw how one of the monsters flies on the side of him, looking like a real demon. But his goal was not only the so-called Shura, but also the princess, who was next to her fiancé. However, Xiao reacted in time and immediately intervened to defend her princess. But the man turned out to be stronger than the guard, so in one ointment he threw her to the side. Now the princess personally had to attach strength to this fight and get sharp weapons to protect. The woman managed to push the demon to a safe distance, but he remained unharmed, as he dodged in time. The first was quite well owned by martial arts with weapons, so at such moments it was better not to approach it. With the movement of a sharp sword, she seemed to create a protective grid around him, against which the demon tried to fight. And this time he managed to reach his own, so he broke through the protection of the princess and left. The woman turned to an old acquaintance and asked what was due to such his behavior. As it turned out, the demon was called Moran, and in response to the princess's question, he said that he simply decided to stretch himself, as he annoyed the pain in the back. Then, by the first, she spoke to her mother. She was worried about the question of what exactly the brides do before the wedding. Suddenly, the third demon, named Marie, said that earlier rumors had reached him that Shura had disappeared. But apparently, they have already found him. Marie specially tried to put pressure on the princess and asked everything about Shura, they say. On such an important day, his disappearance was catastrophic. Then she again spoke to her mother and was surprised at the calmness of the first, because in her place, she would have killed that demon for a long time. At that moment, Maran came closer to Lu and asked if he had left his bride and went straight behind his mistress. The princess understood that the information about which these demons were discussed for a long time refuted. Therefore, if among those present there is someone who killed Shura, he must immediately admit. In addition, the investigation most likely continued, because so far there were no exact evidence of the death of the groom. Maran asked the princess to forget about her future husband and take him to the grooms, saying that it would be the right decision. But suddenly the demon decided to change his tactics, and officially called Shura to a duel, whose winner would receive the princess. All those present unanimously supported such a challenge. Since in this world, most of the things decided precisely the physical struggle, it was not clear for Xiao what these three demons were doing, but the first to explain that they were trying to provoke Shura. The guard understood that something was wrong, so she warned her mistress. Meanwhile, Lu in a new body felt uncertain and trembled that the women noticed this. The guy could not cope with his emotions and was always on the verge of losing consciousness. He had to find the nearest support, because his heart knocked so hard, as if here it would jump out of his chest. Legs themselves were shown, so the guy still could not stand on his own. At some point, he realized that these sensations were already familiar to him, and came to the conclusion that we were talking about fear. Once he was on the verge of life and death, but he never experienced fear so intensively. Now he was trying to understand why this is happening to him. He felt like a sheep among a flock of hungry wolves. It was worse than death because there is a feeling of hunting. Now he really perceived all demons around as sinful wolves with red, wild eyes. Meanwhile, the princess watched the guy's behavior and saw what was invisible to his eyes. It was about the illusions that one of the demons could use if the Lu was a real Shura in place. For him, it would not have become a problem, but given the fact that the guy has a human soul, This may mean that they will still break him soon. But if the princess now intervenes and does something, then everyone will immediately understand that the human spirit is present among them. Lu's hallucinations continued, and all before his eyes seemed to blur, so his head was dizzy. It was even difficult for a guy to breathe. His soul is not used to such strong interventions from demonic forces. He felt how much his heart was beating. The impression was created as if someone would crush him in his hands and it would explode. Then Moran approached the young man and ordered the guy to say something, because he looked rather sluggish. However, Lu did not react to his words and orders, because he could not even raise his head. This greatly angered the general, so he took it as a disrespect for his person and decided to teach the so-called Shura force. But suddenly the princess intervened and quietly hit her fiancé from her feet in the back so that Moran did not do it. The general was shocked that the wife herself attached power to the destruction of her husband, and Lu himself fell to the ground. Generals Mami and Marie also did not know what to add, so they simply watched the course of events. The guests present were surprised, because they planned the other day to come to the wedding to this pair. And now something terrible happened between the brides. The princess needed to explain her behavior, so she turned to Shura and said that she did not need a man who does not value her. And if he does not solve this misunderstanding right now, then it cancel everything. At that moment, Lu was able to open his eyes, and glancing at the princess, he began to understand what she was trying to do. He needed a few more seconds to definitely come to his senses, and then he saw the same boot that hit him in the back. But suddenly Lu managed to stand on his own and he felt that he could again breathe freely and move. Then Moran asked what happened to Shura, who behaves like a coward that could not cope even with a woman. But now the young man was more confident in himself and answered, "They say he felt that something was wrong with him." But now an insight came to him and he realized that everything was because of the general. At that moment, Moran changed his gaze. Now in his eyes there was a desire for death and revenge. However, such a mood only played in the hands of Lu, and he decided to tease such a confident general. Then he suddenly rushed from his knees and hit the demon on his stomach with the words that he had no right to insult his bride. At that moment, Moran felt severe pain, from which incomprehensible emotions of pain appeared on his face. Xiao turned to her mistress and called the new Shura to a cowardly coward, and her mother sat and rejoiced that she was a woman, not a man, because otherwise she would have to take part in this action. General Marie grimaced because he understood how painful his colleague was. But the god of death by Shura was now humiliated in his eyes. Meanwhile, Lu was able to stand on his feet and remove all the dust from his clothes, while Moran suffered, twisting like a baby. The audience discussed the power of Shura and were proud of them, but no one would like to be in his place and overcome General Moran. After all, now the demon sought to deal with his ardent enemy as soon as possible. But now this was not the best time for this, since they had just made an announcement about the arrival of the King of Demons. At that moment, a black abyss formed right in the ceiling of the palace, from which a pink radiance was radiated. Moran did not have time to recover. The majestic arrival of the main demon of their tribe began. The arrival of the King of Demons resembled an apocalypse, which was about to easily destroy the whole world. At that moment, all the generals began to line up in a row and kneel for the king in front of him. Then the princess first named her name. Her name was Maya. And to Mom, as always, smiled affectionately. Her gaze has always been cute and innocent. All the generals met the king, and Xiao and Lu stood behind, as the guy was first present at this. The whole crowd, gathered to see the negotiations, also bowed and knelt before the main demon. But the princess surprised the behavior of Moran. It seems he was not going to show his respect for the king. After humiliation because of Maya's words, he still had to obey, despite discontent. He reluctantly became on one knee and tried to hide his gaze, which gave all his thoughts for show. Soon, Lu realized that he should also behave accordingly, and bowed remembered that in the documents it was considered, as if the King of Demons was considered an incredible monster with a high rank. But when the king nevertheless appeared, then instead of a large and powerful monster, the guy saw a little capybara. The animal was rather cute and innocent. But Lu could not hide his surprise. Suddenly, the young man heard Maya's voice, who asked him not to be surprised, and later he would know everything. But now it was not clear why he was the only one who hears the words of the princess and reacts to them. But as it turned out, the first applied telepathy, which was owned by the demons. Therefore, this is why only the guy heard a female voice in his head. Then the girl managed to explain that the king was very old and entrusted to the 4 generals through whom Maya was through. The king rarely shows his face. He always tries to contact through other objects. And Shura has never seen the king of demons during his lifetime. So now Lu had to behave according to the history of the former owner of his new body. Soon the king said that he had an important conversation. Very soon, a meeting of 4 tribes should take place, so they need to choose a new representative who will go there. Maya continued to listen, although she gradually built a plan for how to become the very representative of the demon tribe. But Marie also had some hopes for the place of the official representative, so he was not going to just give such a valuable place. In addition, among them there was also a Moran who was used to fighting for himself, all the best thanks to physical strength. What cannot be said about the mother, who basically preferred special negotiations, using her appearance. In the meantime, Lu thought about what a meeting of 4 tribes is, and what is its meaning. Maya heard his thoughts and explained that every 5 years all the monsters' tribes gather. They discuss all important matters that can be related to politics, or the separation of territories, and the most important persons attend this event, and until recently the King of Demons was also present there. Therefore, in other words, the princess tried to convey that the chosen as a representative could become the next king. Now the guy became clear, and the embarrassed fullness of all 4 generals is clear. Marin considered himself the best and strongest general of all, so he confidently said in his words that he would be an ideal candidate for this role. But Moran had a slightly different energy, unlike other generals. But he is too rude, and he is still on others. Marie called this a complete shame. After all, this is not about power, but about the ability to use his brain, which Marin did not know how to do in his opinion. Marie was weaker, but very smart, which made him a really good candidate. Then Xiao intervened in the conversation and said that a noble general should go to the meeting. That was the Mayan princess, the daughter of the king, who should take part in this event. But although the girl was the daughter of the main demon, however, women have a very low status in this tribe. Moran turned to the princess and said that when he had time, let him learn to persuade the men so that her fiancé would not leave her again, because women, according to him, should not take part in this. Suddenly, a poisonous snake appeared near the man, which hissed at him with a wild gaze. The insidious creature began to rush at the demon, and was close to wrapping his neck and strangling. Moran tried to take off the snake from his body, but she was more agile and well shied away from his hands. However, the general suddenly managed to deliver one blow and drop a reptile of several meters. At that moment, she spoke to her mother and said that if a man would be like this to women, then the next time the snake will kill him. The woman knew how to use her energy in the right way, being cruel in nature. It fascinated many men, and even used some of them as slaves. But her spell did not act on Moran, so he became a combat position and asked if the girl wanted to fight with him. At that moment, the girl replied that there was no sense in this, because the general had already won. Therefore, if he continues in this spirit, he will soon be disgraced. Marana began to annoy such words because they were pure truth and could become an obstacle to his way to power. At that moment, Marie spoke and said that it does not matter, a man or woman. For the tribe, power was important. Therefore, despite the floor, he himself was ready to support the stronger and help him. Then the crowd began to discuss, saying that everyone present has a chance. It never happened to the king to choose candidates among generals, so it is worth being strong to become a representative of the tribe. After that, the men ordered Moran to prepare and themselves occupied combat positions. People suddenly began to rush to a strong general in an attempt to defeat him, but all their forces were in vain, since Moran was stronger than all of their combined. At that moment, Lu realized that Marie turned his compatriot into the enemy, which was manifested by his mind and cunning. And the young general himself understood that when people lose their strength, he himself would need to intervene. Because in such negotiations it is important to be malicious in order not to waste time fighting between each other, since this can cause anarchy. But soon she decided to show her strength to her mother that she took out a sharp knife and wanted to rush into the crowd with a fight. But first, she needed to defeat Marin, who was just turned her back to her at that moment. However, Maya managed to notice and understand the general plan of the general, so she rushed to defend him. Now the fight has begun between 2 women who have always cooled fruitfully together. Suddenly, Mother began to use her forbidden technique, namely a challenge of a poisonous snake. She immediately rushed to Maya, but the princess was pretty dull and could defeat the reptile with her bare hands. But the princess also had a special weapon resembling the cobra that rushes in response to the attack. Now, two women were connected by their own energies among themselves and could not find a solution to the general problem. On the one hand, she told her mother, who, according to her, defended the princess. Therefore, it was not clear to her why she was bothering her, because women should support each other, and Maya took the side of men, which was strange. But the first explained that she does not support any of the two sides. It was terrible to arrange a massacre at such a time, which is why it intervened. Lu heard everything, so he was delighted with smiling, because Maya was a little wiser and now solved the issue differently. But the problem was not only in the princess. All other demons thought only about their own benefits, and it was difficult to stop them. Lu perfectly understood that no one would listen to him, which means that you need to contact someone more authoritative. But while women tried to find out the relationship, Moran did not waste time in vain and took out a huge sharp sword. In an effort to win and remain the only leader of all demons, the general was ready for anything, even to kill his colleague. Lu noticed in time that Moran plans to do, so he shouted Maya to be careful and dodged. The girl did not immediately understand what the guy was hinting at. So when she turned behind her, she saw a magnificent demon. He quickly landed and was in the place where the princess stood a few seconds ago. Moran cut off the women with his weapon, and those from surprise scattered in two different directions. Maya managed to group and did not damage itself during the flight, although it was close to accidental injury. Shio immediately came running to the girl and was ready to help, since judging by the expression on her mistress's face, she still turned a little, and Mommy was more worried about her snake, so she immediately asked the one that she was normal. Marie turned to Moran and said that he went too far because he dared to touch the precious reptile. The girl was very upset about the snake, and told the general that if something happens to her favorite, she would not forgive him for this. After the last words, the woman took advantage of magic and simply dissolved in the air. But Moran was only delighted with him. He told everyone directly that his mother is a weak fool who throws her problems and failures on everyone. Then he pointed his hand at all those present and stated that none of them was capable of anything, so who wants to die could approach him. But the destruction in one instant so many people indicated the real combat power of General Moran. The princess and mother were defeated, which means to cope with the giant is now unrealistic. People talked among themselves and came to the conclusion that so far, it is better for them to stop and not approach the general. Meanwhile, Moran himself turned to the king of demons and asked if he saw how the real lord should act. He was sure that no one would deny his strength, so he told the king so confidently. The princess did not like such egoism and stubbornness, but she could not object to her father's words. Marie decided to keep silent again, because his plan was not fulfilled, which means he calculated everything poorly. Suddenly, the king of demons proclaimed his verdict and declared Moran as a member in the council of 4 clans. No one would have to oppose royal words, but suddenly Lu extended his hand. The guy did not fully know what he was doing, but there was nowhere to go. Xiao and Maya did not suspect that the young man would decide on such a trick, so they did not know what to expect further. Moran was also surprised when Shura showed his vote, despite the fact that less than an hour ago, he lost consciousness from the presence of a giant. Marie did not expect such confidence from the new one, and asked Shuru that he was also interested in the city council. Like it is unexpectedly that a man is still interested in something other than spending time with the day of the king of demons. Now looking at the princess, the general realized that his enemy also had ambition. Xiao did not know how to convey Lu that he had committed stupidity. After all, no one can resist the strength and energy of Moran. Mizya tried to convey the thought to the guy so that he would still give up and retreat. But then he smiled calmly and said that he knew what he needed to do. Moran's eyes turned red and exhaled. He said that he had to do something else for Shura. Suddenly, he took out a sharp sword that overcame 2 women and rushed at the young man directly from above so that he had no chance. In his thoughts, there was only a plan how to get rid of an opponent and take the princess to himself as a wife. But suddenly, Lu put his hand and calmly said that he was not going to measure strength and compete. The man was shocked and did not know what exactly Shura intended when he decided to interrupt the battle. The man had to bend over so that Lu in his ear told about his idea about how to solve the conflict. Apparently, the general did not like what he heard, and a cold sweat passed through his face. But he did not rush again at the young demon, who looked into his eyes and smiled defiantly. After that, Moran turned to the Lord of the Demons and wondered with the fact that the words of Maya and Shura are correct. Like it was reckless and you should not enter into a fight without the need. Therefore, through force, he asked the king to allow his daughter to participate in the council of 4 monsters clans. Now, according to Marin, the daughter of the master of the Mayan demons may be present instead of him, and there are no problems in this. The guests attended and the negotiations were shocked. No one expected that the giant Moran would change his mind so quickly. Marie felt that there was some lies in the general's words, so he directly asked what he had planned and whom he wanted to substitute. But Maran was not going to explain everything, so he once again emphasized that this is an order that no one could condemn. Like, everyone looks only at the fact that they do not see a continuous picture in front of them. The participation of all the others in the assembly does not make sense, because there are many wounded, and this will only be shame. But some were surprised, because Maran, on the contrary, began to quarrel and wounded everyone with his own hands. Then the big man could not stand it and ordered everyone to shut up without interrupting him. The guys and women had nothing to add. The behavior of one of their heroes was very different and incomprehensible what was due to. Then the king proclaimed that Maran refuses his rights and recommends his mother. But he also left the right to a question. And that moment, the general as quietly but confidently said that everyone who would against it would automatically be his enemies. And that moment, Marie thought about being attached a provocative question, but still decided to refrain. After Shura's strict gaze, the general changed his suspicious look and seemed to put on another mask. The man paused and said that if Moran puts forward such a candidacy, he would not argue. People needed authority, and this time he was one of the generals, to whose opinion they listened and repeated his own words. After a unanimous vote, the king of demons said that the next council of 4 clans would be a Mayan representative. The lord turned to his daughter and ordered that she would not fail their tribe and achieve benefits for demons. Xiao was glad for her mistress, as if for myself, and was ready to be near her in any case. Then the princess bowed to the king and promised to observe his instructions. After the negotiations were completed, each of them went to his own chambers. Dragons were waiting for the owners near the palace, among whom was the dragon Shura, in whose body there was now the soul of Lu. Before leaving the palace, Marin looked anger at the young man, but did not say a word to him and flew out on deeds. His dragon looked according to the owner, quite large, fiery, with powerful wings and tail. Soon Xiao came up to Lu and asked directly what the guy did to change the situation like that. Lu shrugged and said that he did not make any efforts to somehow influence the big man. However, the woman ordered her not to lie, because Marin is not one of those with whom you can agree, and to make him change his own opinion is a rather difficult task, so she demanded the truth. The princess did not say anything, but only looked with sad eyes at the guy, as if begging to hear what had happened. And Lu was difficult to keep against her appearance and attractive eyes. So suddenly he was fastened and blushed. But despite this, he again emphasized that he did nothing special. It's just that then Marana whispered in his ear that if someone knows how he sold children of animals winged for the sake of poison experiments, he will not be able to return alive. It was after these words that the general looked with fear in the eyes of the guy and covered with the cold later. And Xiao was more interested in whether Saran really sold the children of animal men for the sake of experiments. At that moment, Maya realized that it was precisely because of this that the healthy man lost her place in participation in negotiations with clans. But the princess was more surprised by where the guy owns this information, because she did not hear about this. Then Lu smiled and reminded his words that he was really very smart. The army archives have documents with secret information, to which only the highest command has access. But Kanda Yu forced the lower soldiers to perform various tasks. Then Lu saw this information in the archive, and he never forgets what he saw. There was information about Moran. He not only sold children, but also dropped all the blame on the human army. As a result, creative people and ordinary people started the war to return the children, and suffered great defeats. Then Xiao asked if the guy remembered the documents so quickly due to the fact that he was preparing for something in advance. But now the young man felt better, because as it turned out, he could not be so disinterested. At that moment, Maya smiled at him in response and said that now he was finally really useful. Then Lu noted that its value has not yet been disclosed to the end, so do not underestimate it, and we must still give a chance. At first, the princess thought about his words, but later mentally agreed. Suddenly Marie came and turning to Lu, as a real Shura said that he quickly convinced Marin, and this is really impressive. At that moment, the young man was not glad to see the general, because he could only relax after a really intense conversation. But there was no way back, so Lu called Moran stupid and explained that he was inciting other demons to fight him, and he was watching from the side to profit. And he called Marie a much more significant and more intelligent player in this tribe. Suddenly, the general laughed and asked Shura not to joke anymore. However, he immediately noted that he noticed changes in the smell that comes from the guy. Lu wondered what Marie was talking about, so he asked for what smell he talks about and what it means. The general smiled and noted that we are talking about fear, the smell of human fear that is so known for demons. Xiao and Maya tensed at that moment, although they knew that they had previously given a ring for Lu, which was supposed to mask the smell. And the young man himself thought about the fact that now he could really accidentally give out his real person. Marie tried to get closer to Lu and completely feel his smell, which was very reminiscent of human fear. From the experiences, the guy was barely able to swallow saliva, because it seemed that it was created that in the throat was a lump from the prediction of death. But at some point, Xiao intervened in the conversation, and turning to the general said that his behavior was very rude and ugly. Marie was surprised that the girl was so angry. They say he just thought that his sense of smell could let him down, so he voiced it. Then Maya spoke and said that Shura killed a lot of people, so the smell of blood could have seeped through his clothes. Without unnecessary objections, her colleague agreed with such an opinion, because this was really quite profitable. Suddenly, the man closed his face and said that it looked like a princess found not only a good man, but also an ally. He no longer began to explain anything, but only laughed strangely, which was usually inherent in his behavior. And leaving some understatement, he left the company and went about his business outside the royal parade ground. At that moment, Xiao immediately asked what his words meant, and Maya explained that Marie masterfully controls consciousness, especially enjoys fear and despair of victims before death. And most likely, the general released a special demonic energy on Lu, which testified to his doubt in the guy. Now the young man did not know what to do, because this feeling, when fear covers the body, was terrible for him and worse than death itself. At some point, it seemed to him that all the bones began to break one after another and his body could not withstand such a load. Lu thanked the princess for being next to him and intervened in time, but he understood that the next time he could not stand it. Maya said that after this day, Moran would certainly begin the hunt for Shura's body, and Marie will hilt information all the time. The princess and Xiao herself will not be able to always be next to the guy, so he should learn to defend himself on his own, so that everyone believes that he is a real Sura. But according to the guard, he was too weak that even an ordinary demon could overcome him. Lu did not like that he was perceived by so weak, so he immediately began to behave like an offended child. Maya explained that the body of Lu is the body of Sura, but the soul is human, and if you try, it can be used somehow. Now the princess had at least some plan, so she led the young man along a huge mountain on the outskirts of the city. On the mountain there was a special palace with a huge gate, which were previously closed. Lud had not heard about this place before, so he asked women where exactly they brought him, and for what purpose. Then Maya returned and said that this is Sur's weapons house, which will now belong to its new owner. The demon was used to pick up the weapons of killed enemies as trophies, but he killed so much that he had nowhere to put up his weapons, so he built this warehouse. Now it was even more interesting for the guy to get inside, so he let the princess go forward and she was the first to open the gate. Inside there was a cold room, partially resembling a morgue in the hospital. Gray tiles on the walls and floor, and a lot of acute weapons. A variety of swords, spears, knives hung on the shelves. All of them were perfectly polished and served as certain museum specimens. Wherever Lu turned his head, iron blades flickered everywhere and sparkled. Now it was even difficult to imagine how much Sura committed the murders, and it is clear why he was called the God of Murders. For the first time, Lu Live saw a shield of the Armor Clan, which was decorated with sharp spikes to serve as a certain weapon. Nearby was a rare weapon of livestock, which was distinguished by its construction and materials. Soon he also noticed army guns, which were most familiar to the ordinary person who arrived from the ground. And there were 2 fangs nearby, which Lu had noticed somewhere before. Could not remember that he had once seen them like this separately from the owner. As it turned out, during one of the battles, Sura pulled these fangs from the winged and took them to himself. At that moment, Lu began to suspect that the demon had some kind of mental disorder. Maya again accidentally read the guy's thoughts and explained that Sura's power was incredible. And besides his power, there was also another reason. Namely, it was about weapons, which the god of the murder himself used during the battles. After her words, the princess pointed to the sword, which was as if shrouded in human blood and glowing fire. This sword was made of special material, so no one except Sur owned such weapons. According to Maya, this Sura's sword was called a virgin wolf, and not just wore this loud name. Suddenly Lu interrupted the girl and said that he did not see anything special. but at least there was something to catch on the eye. Xiao could not tolerate such ignorance, and by hitting the young man ordered that he would not defile a majestic thing with his stupid statements. Indeed, according to history, when a virgin wolf appeared, an unprecedented war broke out in the world of demons, and Moran, Mami and Mami fought with each other all the time. In the end, gradually each of them received severe injuries, and they could not continue to fight. Even the Lord of the Demon himself could not master the virgin wolf when he appeared. In the end, the war ended when Sura decided to join the battle for weapons. Countless demons died in an attempt to take possession of weapons without even touching this sword. Virgin. Wolf is not just a weapon. This is a powerful demon that embodied in a sword. The one he wounds loses its strength absorbed by the owner. The more you kill, the more powerful you become. But even if Lu has no such magical power, he could try to use this sword in order to absorb the power of demons. Then the young man immediately realized that when he could absorb enough magical power, he could become Jura. But in the end, the young man was sure that he would be able to surpass the previous owner and become a new god. The girls did not understand such self-confidence in their abilities from Lu, so they decided to first give him some easily test. But despite this, they were sure that he would not be able to defeat even the lower demonic beast, since the guy had no combat experience at all. Small, strange animals, similar to blue balls, suddenly began to rush at Lu, and he could not even defend. They were stronger enough, as they could easily hit the young man to severe pain, and he just stood and coughing. Soon Lu decided to try to do something, and said to one little man that she does not look strong and absolutely ruthless. But suddenly, this blue ball turned with horns to the guy who looked rather sharp and could easily injure. Then Lu realized that he needed to fight back immediately. Otherwise he risks him to die loss of blood because of some demonic animal. He did not want to leave his life from such death, so he nevertheless decided to grab Sur's powerful weapon. He tried to grab the sword from the ground, but he was rather heavy, as if glued to the ground, so the young man could not do something. He began to be angry with himself, because now it turns out that he is really as weak as Maya said with Zhao, but there was no more time for thought and unnecessary words. Since the beast turned his face and opened his mouth with sharp teeth, the situation became too dangerous. So casting attempts to master the powerful weapon, Lu simply began to run away. The princess looked at him and said that from the very beginning she suspected that Lud was weak, but not to such an extent. Moreover, he cannot even use the weapon normally, but says something about the superiority of Sur, the body of the real god of murders, but without his strength. That is why Virgin Wolf did not recognize him as its true owner. Now this thought did not get out of Maya's head. It was now really clear to her why the sword did not recognize the owner. And suddenly, the girl remembered one moment from the struggle, which she hoped seemed to her an ordinary mistake. Meanwhile, the demonic animals continued to attack Lu in an attempt to teach him to defend himself and beat in response. But the young man did not know how exactly he even needed to stand in order to evade these creatures in time, which flew on him like bullets from a gun. One after another, the animals beat the guy on the body and head, and he did not leave attempts to dodge at least one of them. And finally, he managed to turn the body in time so that the enemy simply flew past him. But this was even more angry with little demons, so they decided to show their maximum forces. Lu was already wounded, and now he saw really sharp teeth and red demonic eyes in animals that could not leave him alone. Moreover, now they have united in a large group from their own kind and were ready to rush at the guy simultaneously. The princess watched Lu sets off and waited for him to finally capture. However, I realized that now it could become a very dangerous moment for the human soul, so I decided to intervene on my own. The girl immediately rushed to a flock of wild animals and took out her special weapon, which, as a whip, waved in different directions. The princess could easily tame every animal and show which of them is really stronger and who should obey. In one fell swoop of Knut, Maya sour cream from the road of several such creatures, and they scattered like balls for bowling. In less than a minute, the girl built animals in one group, and they no longer had a desire to show her aggression for her. Lu did not even have time to blink an eye, as all the animals stopped rushing at him and were rather obedient. Then Maya turned to him and said that it was worth ending with training for today, since Lu does not have enough strength. But the guy was rather stubborn and gently rising, said that it was early to throw attempts to master equipment and weapons. He explained that he simply lost his vigilance, so the next time it would be more attentive and will cope with the task on his own. The princess was not happy with the result, but did not want to clearly manage the new Jura, so she agreed with him. However, she warned that if someone notices traces of the teeth of lower demonic animals on the body of Sur, this would cause a commotion. Lu did not even notice that one of the animals greatly wounded him under his heart, leaving a bloody mark on clothes and body. Suddenly, the young man got angry and hit the sword, said that he was too heavy and it was difficult for him to move. Therefore, he asked if there was a way to make it easier. Maya explained that magic swords, such as Virgin Wolf, recognize only those who are strong in spirit. If they decide that the guy is not worthy, they will not allow them to use. After the words of the princess, Lu remembered something and he was thrown from these memories into cold sweat. It was about the army on Earth, when the commander called him mediocre and said that on the battlefield, Lu would only interfere with everyone. He was always ordered to remove the corpses of monsters that were needed for research, so it was impossible to lose them. Young fighters discussed among themselves that the building was about to collapse, so it is dangerous to go there right now. Lu was rather smart and offered to get this task to robots so as not to risk the lives of people, but the commander did not care. He was more worried about how much the maintenance of such machines could cost, and the life of soldiers for him was much cheaper. Like for the army, the value of the young fighters was just like that, and they are not in vain fed. And now they have no right to say that it is dangerous. Lu was painful to remember such situations from the past, so he asked Maya, did she really think that he was useless? The girl did not have something to say, because after such a spiritual story, she did not want to injure the guy even more. Therefore, the princess simply smiled and advised Lu to go to relax, as he used too much effort after moving the soul. And regarding Deva Wolf, she asked him not to worry, because in the case when he could not master the road, Xiao will be able to protect him. These words strongly touched Lu, so he screamed that he would not allow a woman to always protect him. Unable to withstand the pressure, the guy rushed right into the flock of demonic creatures that were again angry. At that moment, the princess was very scared, since again could not predict the actions of a young man who could become dangerous for him. Lu was not worried about how his trick could end, because he wanted to prove to himself that he was capable of something. He fled to demonic animals with the words, if only they only tried to bite him with his huge mouths and sharp teeth. The young man was ready to smash to the fluff of opponents, who were several times smaller than him. But they had more power. Maya was sure that Lu did not succeed without a virgin wolf, so he just in vain spends his hand. Then the girls thought about the fact that ordinary people are quite young, so they love to play. Demonic creatures were very angry, and when they saw the young man, they rushed to the attack on him. This time they were seriously configured, and quickly began to jump onto Sur's body in an attempt to bite him. Now Lu tried to discard small monsters from all sides, but they were more agile and crawled through his hands. In a matter of seconds, about a dozen animals gathered on one Lu, which, like hungry wolves, were ready to tear it to small pieces. Maya saw that the situation was getting worse, so she ordered the guy to immediately free himself. Otherwise, there would be no living place from him. But Lu still could not defend himself, and in response to attack animals, so he was close to the failure of his mission in this world. At that moment, the princess realized that she immediately needed to intervene and reached for a whip to tame the monsters again. Xiao also spoke to the guy and said that it all looks as if he independently offers himself to be eaten. But suddenly Lu drew attention to the powerful sword, which stood behind him and sparkled in the sun, like that star. Now the young man rushed to the weapon with all his might, carrying a large number of angry demonic animals that had already begun to eat his flesh. The virgin wolf was unshakably stuck in the ground, and only a real owner, or a worthy demon, could use it. But unexpectedly, as soon as Lu entered the area of the sword, they suddenly seemed to unite into one single whole, because of which there was a strong explosion. The explosive wave with me carried a bright radiance that could blind my eyes, so Maya immediately covered her face with her hands. Meanwhile, Lu still managed to master the legendary weapon and pull out a special sword out of the ground, which now belonged only to him. At that moment, Xiao realized that the guy used his body as a bait to lure demonic animals and feed Diva Wolf. But the girl still believed that Lu's act was stupid and resembled suicide, because it was too risky for life. Meanwhile, Lu himself felt that the sword became much easier. He felt some power entered his body. This happened when the weapon took its owner. Maya was unhappy and angry went to the guy. She explained that it was too risky, and he almost became a victim. But Lu was most happy that his plan, although stupid according to some, turned out to be a worker, and he took possession of weapons. He knew that the more risk, the more reward. And if you can't take on such a risk, then you can't become a strongest demon so much. The princess was very surprised at the words heard, since they responded a little. But she still did not want Lu to begin to become so pompous, so she informed him not to rejoice ahead of time. Virgin Wolf will not be able to cope with such a weak beast, and the power that the sword gave the boy is insignificant. Maya was worried about the Council of Four Clans, which was supposed to take place 10 days later. She was sure that Moran would come up with something, so now Lu will have to compete with a stronger enemy. The guy was alarmed from expectation, so he said that he and his new sword are eager for the murders of demons. In this case, the princess could not refuse the new demon, so she turned to Xiao for help with the organization. The girl was only glad to mock a little over the new one, so that he would not overestimate his own strength and understand how weak he was. Then Lu raised his mighty sword and began to swing it in all directions, showing how cleverly he could turn. But suddenly his expression is strange at the moment when Xiao nevertheless went to the room nearby, where his next enemies should have been. Suddenly, lightning flashed over the forest, after which the guy realized that now he would be really hard. Indeed, from a large dark detachment, a lot of pairs of red eyes began to peep, which indicated the number of the following rivals. Seeing Lu's frightened face, Xiao smiled and introduced the enemy, which this time Gale became. The young man was already ready to run again, because the number of stronger demons scared him terribly and caused human fear. But despite his fear, La still took out his sword and rushed with him to go into the battle to go through a large flock of Gales. These were demonic animals resembling bulls and dogs. They had sharp claws and horns, which made them more dangerous. But at some point, Lu experienced a strange feeling that he described as an increase in force in the body, accompanied by an rise. Very soon the guy figured out all the opponents and they never injured him, which was already a good indicator of improving dexterity. Now there was only one frightened wolf in front of him, with which Lu would quickly deal with. His second task was almost completed. But the demonic dog suddenly began to run away towards the forest, and the young man had to chase him to win. But as soon as they found themselves in the forest, the guy lost a trace and he had to quietly shout the last Gale. Suddenly he heard strange sounds somewhere in the bushes, and suspected that it was there that wild and frightened dog could hide. As soon as Lu came closer and looked into the thicket, he still found the enemy and immediately cooked weapons. But it turned out to be unexpected that the unfortunate wolf was already eliminated his demonic life. And it was some more terrible. It was about an animal that looked like a dragon, but smaller in size. He had the same sharp teeth and long claws. At that moment, Lu realized that in front of him was the highest demonic beast, which is much more dangerous than those whom the guy had just won. Given the current forces of the young man, he was too weak to go against such a demon. But if he still manages to do this, then he will absorb great power. Therefore, he decided to turn to his mighty sword for advice, and ask if they should take risks for an increase in the level. Suddenly, Lu heard that in the same thickets someone was still located, which means he still decided to take a chance to rush into battle. At first, he tried to quietly approach the enemy again so that he would not hear him, and did not attack the first. But unexpectedly from behind the bushes, one of the four generals, Mom. The girl was surprised to see Sura here. And Lu, in his body, was even more scared when now one-on-one was left with a stranger among the deaf forest. A misunderstanding arose between Lu and Mommy, since both did not expect to see each other in such a place. The girl was frightened, so when she went to Kuru, she tried to hide her emotions and behave habitually. But Lu himself suspected something. It was not clear to him why my mother was here, because it was the impression that she was following him all the time. But it would be even worse if the girl eavesdropped at the whole conversation and could find out the whole truth about the death of Sir. But when the guy examined her more attentively, he noticed that she was very wounded, and that prevented her from walking. But suddenly Lu had an interesting idea, but it was not human. But given what world the guy now lived in, it was necessary. He looked at a stronger demonic beast, which, meanwhile, was eating himself like a similar and smaller demonosphere. Then he thought that if he does not interfere, then the demons would figure it out. You just have to wait for the right moment and take advantage of the situation. Namely, the guy thought that a strong beast rushed at his mother, and those to each other began to start a bloody battle. Then Lu would simply finish off one of them and received food. However, Mommy herself at that moment thought that there was not a single man who would not succumb to her female spells. Therefore, the girl wanted this, so that Shura would take up a terrible beast, and at that time she would have the opportunity to escape from the forest. But while the general took one of the steps to the guy, accidentally stepped on a dry stick that cracked loudly under her. The sound was quite sharp due to complete silence in the forest, so the demonic beast immediately paid attention and angry. He was looking for a source of Christ. At that moment, Lu and Mommy had the same thought in his head, namely, fear due to the fact that they were nevertheless noticed. For the girl, that beast was not so terrible, but she did not want to spend her strength and energy on struggle. In a matter of seconds, the monster rushed on the attack on two demons, releasing his claws and preparing sharp teeth. At that moment, Mommy turned to Suru to help her and defeated the terrible beast, saving the girl. But he decided to run the first as far as possible, and was ready, so that the monster ate the general, but so that he would not touch him. But Mommy was also not going to mess with the animal on her own, so she released her snake, which instantly crawled behind Sura. The reptile enveloped the guy, and he could not take a step in the moment, as the snake's body squeezed his body. But Mom did not just use her strength. The snake helped the girl immediately get to the guy and move on him. Therefore, the general soon found herself on the back of Lu and, clasping him with both hands, waited for him to start further. She directly expressed her dissatisfaction that in such situations, the gentleman should be a hero and save, and to run away meanly. Like after that, he cannot call himself a man. But Lu was not at a loss, and ordered the girl not to approach him, because his wife hates her, and if he sees them together, he will be very angry. She knew how to put pressure on weaknesses, and asked why a person who is called the god of murders obeys her wife. So if everyone finds out about it, they will laugh. But Lu was still gossip, so he remembered a giant monster from the forest and rushed again, but this time not alone. The dragon was already nearby, and suddenly, he began to accumulate energy, which, as a result, was poured with a fiery current from his mouth. The beast wanted to get its prey as soon as possible, since due to the eating of demons, it also became stronger. The monster, although it was at a certain distance from Lu, but its fiery stream was quite large, so he could burn his back to the guy. At that moment, Mommy sat behind Lu, who, at a profitable moment for her, moved to her young man's neck, so as a result she was safe for her. But the body of Sir Monster still managed to get it. Now the guy could not restrain his tears from the pain due to the fire, which set fire to the back. Meanwhile, Mother, continued to dodge and occupy profitable poses for her to remain unharmed, because the whole attack would go to Sura. As a result, the guy's strength decreased along with his speed, because of which the dragon became too close and released all his anger. The dragon had its own certain volume of fire, and when it ended, then through the burning back Lu still remained a fiery trunk. As soon as he managed to escape to a safe distance, the man threw his mother from his shoulders, who did not expect such rudeness from him. Now his main goal was to extinguish the new body as quickly as possible and find the things suitable for this in the deep forest. And while he was trying to help himself, his mother only smiled and rejoiced that the young man was painful. As soon as it became easier for him, in an instant, Sur's gaze changed and he was seriously determined to deal with the general. He directly said that using it as a shield from fire and not to help it was very mean. Suddenly, the girl held out her hands to his neck and slowly began to approach her face, as if she wanted to kiss. Then she said that she did not see anything bad in her act. As it turned out, she found out that Lu wanted to use as a bait to escape, and now they are flowers. The guy tried to throw his hands on his body from his body, and ordered that she would not even think of clinging to him. But the girl was not going to just throw the god of murders, especially since they again heard the sounds of a fiery dragon. The general was not scared. She knew that she could stand up for herself, but sought to see what Sura was in business. At that moment, Lu looked like a real hero. Did not abandon a woman who did not even know well, but rather did it because of his human soul. Such actions and manifestations of assistance were not inherent in demons, which greatly distinguished her from real people. Lu did not know where exactly needed to run, so as a result he was on a cliff of the rock, where there was a dead end below because of poisonous vapors. From Maya's stories, he knew that these waters are dangerous even for most demons, not to mention people. But the dragon was getting closer with every second, and it was quite difficult to find a solution in such a difficult situation. Mommy at that moment tried to hide behind Sur's powerful body, and was not worried about the further course of events. Lu knew that when he meets face to face with a demonic animal, the general would recognize his true essence. At some point, he began to suspect that this could be her insidious plan. But now there was a question of survival. Having no choice, and being with a girl in his arms, because of hopelessness, the guy shouted that he would have to act. When the dragon was already too close, Lu took his mother again and began to quickly run forward, where they were waiting for a cliff. At that moment, the girl had already begun to worry and asked the guy what he was up to, since it would be quite dangerous to jump down. But the young man did not listen to her and continued to quickly run forward. The general could no longer stand it and began to scream so that he stopped. She told Suru so that he would not get her into his affairs. But the man pressed the fragile waist even more to himself and did not stop. He smiled at his mother and said that a minute ago she stuck to him, and now he wants to run away, which he would not allow. Therefore, after a moment, Lu rushed right from the cliff, and at that moment prepared his powerful weapon, which was part of the plan. The demonic dragon did not hesitate, and ran directly after his prey, despite the fact that now only death awaits him. But Lu was much smarter, and at the time of the fall, he managed to stick a sharp sword into the rock to fix in the air. Due to additional weight, sharp weapons cut the rock and damaged it, but still stopped at a certain point, not reaching to poisonous waters, and the demonic dragon himself flew into the abyss, which was his last flight in this world. When the animal fell into poisonous water, the drops began to fly in different directions. But Lu managed to evade the deadly substance. Meanwhile, the beast in a matter of seconds disappeared into the sea, and only a surviving skeleton popping up to the surface remained from it. At that moment, the guy became scared that even an animal of this size in an instant of an eye was dissolved. So it is scary to imagine what would be with a person. Suddenly, the guy began to feel a strange cold in the part of the body where General Mami held onto him so as not to fall. Then he looked at her crossed legs, greatly trembling with fear of death. Lu was very surprised at such a powerful woman. He tried to speak to the girl, but she was very shy about the situation in which she was now and could not control him. Then her mother pressed more closely to Kuru, and said that she first had to disgrace her husband so much. At that moment, the general looked so defenseless that the guy became sorry for her and wanted to protect her. But unexpectedly, until he saw, the girl released her snake, which immediately put up sharp teeth and began to hiss. Then she rushed at the guy and painfully bit his hip. And to Mom at that moment she wished the young man to death. From the bite with such sharp clicks, Lu began to scream throughout the abyss, and did not immediately realize what exactly happened to him. He had to quickly throw his body to the mountain so that less strength to hold on to the sword, especially when his hands were aggressively tuned to Mom. When Lu was able to get to his feet, he called the girl ungrateful because he saved her life, for which he received such meanness in response. Then the general directly said that the demons are not grateful, which means that you should not risk yourself for someone. Moreover, Sur had a chance to counterattack his mother, but he missed him and chose to risk his own life for her. And the girl was not going to restrain herself and put her needs in second place. So she stood over the guy. Then she sat rudely from above, just as Maya once did it during their first meeting in the chambers. But Lu now knew that this was a bad position, and thought about why it was all demonesses that always strive to be from above. However, he suddenly remembered that he had heard some gossip before. They say demonesses, despite their weakness compared to men, can absorb their strength through certain actions. His head imprinted the memory of how one of the demoness did this over her boyfriend, leaving him completely without life energy. And now the guy understood that he was in a similar position, and it was worth doing something to survive. He already imagined how exactly he would look after his mother still manages to make her and leave him without strength at the top of the mountain. Then he rushed to the sword with the words that this was not a joke, and he would not allow his accumulated magical power. But to get to the virgin wolf, he was again prevented by the snake, which began to wrap his hand, thereby squeezing the muscles and blood vessels. At that moment, Mother said that it was better not to resist, like the guy was already poisoned by her snake, and this poison was especially for men. And when he lies calmly, there will be no attacks. But if he tries to get up, the poison will instantly spread throughout the body, and then Sura will explode. The guy became disgusting from the fact that now an irreversible reaction begins in his body, because of which he will still die. And my mother was only happy that the next man under her would not resist and obediently would lie under her pressure. And now she will be able to have fun in full, and no one will be an obstacle to receiving what she desired. At some point, the girl's face changed, and she seemed to be concerned about something. Lu was already hoping that she would still have mercy. But the problem was in his chest. After a fight with weaker demonic beasts on the body, there were many deep wounds that healed quite quickly and turned into scars. Now, the guy lay naked under the general and could not even move in order to somehow defend himself. Then the young man was most worried about that. Now his mother learns about his actual human soul and the fact that he could not resist small animals. But the girl was only delighted. She immediately thought about the princess, who, in her opinion, seemed so strict, and now it turns out, loved special games. But she thought not in the direction that played in the hands of Lu. However, in addition, she really liked the guy's body very much. Therefore, she wanted to find out how soon it tastes as soon as possible, and how soon she would take possession of the power of the god of murders. Then Mommy began to use her marriage again, so that she, just in case, controlled her prey. But unexpectedly for the girl, another similar tale appeared, namely the whip, whose owner was Princess Maya. The girl was ready to end the force of the lady because of her defiant behavior, because of which she allowed herself too much and did not restrain her instincts. Maya did not fully know what was happening. But when she arrived quite in time, she asked that Lu and her colleague, her mother, were here with a solitude. At that moment, Xiao intervened and turned to Suru said that while the princess was looking for him, he allows himself to change the bride. The guy tried to justify himself, and at the same time not to make unnecessary movements. So he said that the girl poisoned him with her snake, but Xiao was surprised and explained that if he had been poisoned, he could not be so vigorous. So it seemed that the young man wanted to deceive them. Then Maya also could not stand it and ordered her husband to get up immediately. Otherwise, she will also make physical efforts. But Lu denied everything and said that his mother threatened his life. Like when he gets up, the poison will spread through his body and he will immediately explode. Xiao was tired of listening to such nonsense. So she went to the guy, grabbed his hair and said that such a poison in their world does not exist. The young man was worried that he would explode in a second for a second, but noticed that nothing was happening with his body, and even the place of the bite did not hurt. At that moment, Lu realized that the general deceived him, so pointing a finger at the girl publicly declared this. However, the lady only laughed at the fact that the murder god could be so naive and believe in all female words. Then her gaze again became cute and smiling pleasantly to Kuru. She said that he was like a defenseless child. Now Lu almost exploded with anger. It was not clear to him why the girl wanted to kill him a minute ago, and now he flirts with him again. There was a silence between them for a few more seconds. But then her mother leaned toward the young man, as if to a little dog, and said that there was enough for today, so they would see themselves later. She still wanted to have fun with Sura, but Lu in his body said that if she did not want to die, then let he see another sacrifice. Then the general hugged his neck and said that when the man says no, in fact, this means consent, and she is confident in this theory. Suddenly for everyone, her mother pulled herself closer to the man's head and carefully kissed him on the cheek, as if leaving under completion between them. Lu felt embarrassed, since such behavior of girls for him was strange, and he did not know what to do next. The princess and Xiao were especially angry at that moment. They had been looking for a guy for so long, thinking that he had already died somewhere from a terrible monster, and the guard could not restrain aggression. She was offended that her mother allows himself to behave in front of the princess knowing that Sura was her fiancé. But the general calmly went about her business, cheerfully singing songs and not feeling a drop of guilt. But at that moment Maya turned to her, who did not want to just let the girl go without an order. After all, this mountain was the territory of the princess. Therefore, another general could not come there without her permission. But Mother took it as a manifestation of jealousy and began to laugh at the girl, saying it is not inherent in her and looks very nice. But my mother had one remark, since on this mountain she was not alone. Then she began to talk about that, as after negotiations in the palace, she had to go to the forest to eat. It was about demonic energy, which could only be taken by killing other members of the demonic tribe. And most of all at that moment, energy was needed for her snake, which was wounded precisely during the dispute between her mother and Maya herself. To get power, the girl was used to killing the weak men from her thanks to her female spells, which everyone was conducted. She did not feel her guilt for the murder, since the demons were the most important to protect her own life and needs. The snake was part of her mother and her main weapons, so now she preferred to help almost herself. When the reptile became better due to the restoration of energy, the owner informed her that at some point she would definitely remove the skin from Marin for how he behaved. But now it was necessary to find more additional sources of energy, and suddenly the girl heard strange sounds nearby. Then she decided to look into the bushes with the snake to check whether it would be possible to profit from this creature. But as it turned out, in a small forest glade, the fiery dragon of Moran was resting, which for some reason he left one. And recently, Moran himself was surprised why Shura suddenly returned, because he was supposed to be in demonic lands. Now the general had the impression that he was deceived. But soon Marie came to him and attached new information. As it turned out, all the mandalas sent by them disappeared. Men began to suspect that their messengers were found, which is why they were actually destroyed. Mom then managed to eavesdrop on the conversation a little, because she did not understand why these two hid in such a quiet place. Then Marin continued and asked Marie what he plans to do, and really allow a woman to do anything in his life. But his partner did not make sense to rush, because before the Council of the Four Clans, there was still enough time, so do not rush. In addition, in his opinion, if everything goes well, they will be able to eliminate one of the enemies that will free the path to power. Moran thought at that moment, since he did not understand everyone what Marie was leading and who he was talking about. Then Marie reached for the giant to tell him her secret, so that no one else would hear their conversation nearby. At that moment, she tried to be more attentive to find out as much as possible about the secrets of the two generals. But as soon as she was so close to the information, suddenly one of the weaker demonic animals appeared. He began to rush at the girl, and he had to be distracted to tame the animal, and so that she did not interfere with her. Due to the extraneous sounds that began to be heard from the bushes, Marie drew attention to the fact that someone nearby is, and eavesdropping behind them. The general immediately used magical power to check who was following them and immediately eliminate one of the enemies. He suddenly directed his stream of energy to the bushes, from where the sound was heard, which is why my mother suffered greatly from the attack received. The girl immediately fell for strength, and she realized that she could not cope and win against two powerful people. She was a really smart woman and knew that she needed to think about the future, so now it is better to let go. Suddenly, screams began to be heard from the bushes to men. They say someone almost caught and did not give the opportunity to run away. As soon as Marin and Marie came closer to the thickets, they saw the wounded, weak demonic monster, which barely breathed. The guys knew that his name was Jiran, and were very surprised when they saw him during his secret conversation. Having told all this, Mother added that Moran is not the one who will look from the side. They still seem to have trump cards in their sleeves, which means Maya is better to be careful. The princess was surprised that the girl told her everything in detail, and did not understand why she was trying to extend her hand to help. At that moment, Mother began to flirt again, and her gaze began as when she tried to kiss Lu. Even now, she continued to behave as if trying to seduce the guy at his bride. Then she said that she helps because she likes the future husband of the princess, and she would like to take him to herself. At that moment, Maya was wary, because she really did not like this behavior of the girl, but she could not influence. But when she saw such a reaction, her mother immediately laughed and said that it was just her unsuccessful joke, which should not be paid attention to. Then she added, "They say she was sad because she had to put off fun and look for someone else to discharge." And regarding the reported information, she reported that this was a special gift for their wedding. Therefore, do not resist and be shy to accept such gifts. After the last words, the girl almost dissolved in the air. Xiao did not understand what my mother was talking about. They say they already knew about the plans of men. But Maya now realized that the mandalas are the work of Marie. And according to Mommy herself, Marin and Marie cooperate, but it is not known what exactly they plan to do. Being aware of the latest events, now the princess could build the following plans for how to defend and counterattack enemies. Then she put 2 fingers in her mouth and made a strong exhalation she could whistle, giving a sign for her dragon. After that, a huge animal immediately appeared in the sky and headed for its mistress. Its size compared to ordinary monsters was 10 times larger, due to which he could quickly fly, as he had large wings. The Mayan princess, along with the Xiao's partner, climbed into the flying dragon, and Lu left on the mountain. The guy tried to stop the girls and asked why they did not want to take him with them, and Maya returned and replied that the young man looks pretty vigorous, which means he does not need rest, and he can get home on his own. But in the best case, Lu should have stayed in the forest and continued to defeat all the remaining monsters. Despite his confidence earlier, the guy began to worry about his safety and tried to drop in the dragon. Now Lu had nothing left, except to independently find a way out of the forest and get home. But soon he managed to go to the city center, over which he used to fly. But having overcome a large distance on foot, he realized that he should not be at enmity with women, especially when they are demons and stronger. But as it turned out, feelings. The guy was not as tired as he expected, and his wounds healed quite quickly. Lu walked in the center of the city only in his pants, as his outerwear broke his outer clothing when she tried to pick up his energy. Suddenly, he drew attention to the man who stood in an exquisite suit and tried to call the guy to him. The young man wondered why his name was to himself, so he decided to come closer to the stranger in the market. The man was well dressed, and a measured tape hung on his shoulder, which indicated his professional activity. Lu noticed that bloodied costumes were stacked on the Mr. Counter, and as he understood, it was the form of heroes. Then the seller smiled at him and said that he removed this costume from a human soldier. It had a lot of blood, but the material is quite good. At that moment, Lu drew attention to the epaulets indicating that the officer belonged to Mao, and perhaps something else remained in his pocket. Without unnecessary thought, the guy immediately agreed to buy a suit and thanked the seller for such a good copy. After a long walk, the young man went to his new chambers, wherever no one bothered him, and he was able to see the purchase carefully. He changed into what Maya prepared him, and he carefully laid out the costume from the suit on a large bed. Looking into the outer pocket on his chest, Lu immediately found a small box, which could be a personal trophy. This time he thought for a long time whether it was worth opening it, because he did not know what could be expected from the found thing in a bloody suit. But as it turned out, inside there were contact lenses of heroes with an electronic chip. It can determine the level of monsters by their energy. However, only officers and higher can wear them. That is why many soldiers die, not knowing the level of enemy power. When Lu managed to get a similar thing in the black market through communications, but those lenses broke on the very first day of use, and he had to spend a lot of time on making money to buy them. It would be better to spend this money on something tasty. Now, being a different creature, but remaining with the old soul, the guy was painful to remember those moments. Having taken out one lens, he thought whether the eyes of demons were arranged in the same way as that of ordinary mortal people. But not knowing the answer to this question, Law nevertheless ventured to try to test the lenses found on his own body. After he put them on, he did not notice anything special. Therefore, I decided to get to the mirror and clearly check. Now that the guy looked at his reflection, his silhouette seemed to be covered with large blood spots. Carefully considering himself in the mirror, Lu was frightened from what he saw, since he still could not take himself for a real demon. Suddenly, the lens system showed that its strength is 30, the dexterity of 20, the protection of 10, and the rank is already with the level. The latter pleasantly surprised the guy, so he needed not so much effort to apply to pump his properties. After all, the ranks of the monsters were shared from A to F, and some rare S and above are called higher monsters, and it was pretty good. At first, Lu could not even defeat Heron, and now, in one day he rose to the level. It looks like a guy really had a talent. He knew that the virgin wolf demands a rank that would correspond to its owner. That is, the stronger the LU will become, the higher the rank of demons, which he wins. And if he competes with fiery animals as it was a few hours ago, then physical attacks will not be enough. So we need the real power of the demon. Among the monsters, the style of the fight of demons is most like human abilities. The attacking elements were lightning, fire, and ice. As for creative abilities, it is the earth and wood that were the most mundane. But besides all of the above, there are also special mental abilities for which you need to have an appropriate rank. The problem was that Lu did not know what kind of type he had, which gave him unnecessary problems with the search. Suddenly, Witty remembered that a strange force rose from the depths of his body, as if she herself at the right moment began to defend him. Then Lu suspected that this was a feeling of magic, and now he needed to try to reproduce that feeling in an artificial way to understand what it is called. Therefore, for a start, it was convenient to sit down and find peace inside, then transfer it to the body. It was meditation that was needed in order to recreate certain memories or feelings from memory. But after a few minutes of calm time, the guy suddenly fell on the bed and lost consciousness from the overload to the brain. In his head, certain delusional ideas began regarding the fact that he was now worried. As it turned out, most of all, he thought about the human world. Before his eyes was visible a scene on which there was an officer and proclaimed the end of a long war against monsters, at the end of which they still won. And according to him, this merit was one person who fearlessly penetrated the enemy camp, suffered and fought, alone destroyed the enemy from the inside, and destroyed the monsters, and calling this man the hero of all mankind. The man pointed a finger at Lu himself in a military suit. At that moment, the guy looked like the happiest person in the world, who was still able to prove his strength. All the guests present began to call the guy a thirsty hero, and without stopping raised glasses with wine for his health. Then Lu went out to the officer and even trembled a little because of so much attention in his direction. The officer said that the father of the guy, and he himself, is also real heroes and pride of all mankind for his actions. Therefore, on behalf of the army, he was awarded the highest award, namely an Order of the First Degree. For La, this was an extreme victory over himself, and also a great honor to be called a hero. Then a little boy ran up to him and said that when he grows up, he wanted to become the same as he is to protect everyone. He asked Lu to teach him to compete and be as smart as to win not only by force. Then his mother approached the baby and said that the hero had already defeated Monstroff, and now they should not be afraid of them. Lu also joined the words of the woman and said that the war was over. But humanity still needs strong people, so he will teach his essence of the battle. Now the little goal was to become the adult man who his mother will be proud of. Soon, the company of girls called to Lud and said that they were always confident in his power, despite the past commanders. The man thanked the doctor with the words that if she had not helped him that day, he died and could not save the planet. Suddenly, a friend Tio spoke and said that at that moment the doctor helped him because she was actually secretly in love. At that moment, Lu blushed and did not know what to answer. An awkward wave of silence flashed between him and the girl. When Tio rushed at her friend so that she did not speak nonsense, the girl added that she cried so much on the day of the disappearance of Lu, which is why she confessed her love. Then another friend said, "If the young people love each other mutually, then it would be worth drinking for it." Now for Tio, the time seemed to have froze, because now she could learn about the hero's true feelings in relation to her. But at that moment, Lu smiled at her and directly said that he was mutually loved by a girl, so there really was worth drinking for it. Then he raised a glass of red wine and drank delicious alcohol in one gulp. This idea is also supporting all guests, and the girl could not believe that so many years of waiting were not in vain, and now she found her happiness. Then the young couple became even closer to each other, and all evening wanted to spend in their arms. But now they could not do this. Many in the hall began to scream so that the new hero drank as much as possible, and would not stop this celebration of his sobriety. Soon his stomach was so clogged with liquid that even the leather belt could not stand it, and suddenly burst. After many glasses of wine, Lu nevertheless began to abandon the proposals of colleagues, who were very persistent that evening. And they answered the refusals. They say Lu is not a man, if they do not drink with them, like, he shows his disrespect. Then Tio's friend also intervened, saying that if the guy does not drink, then his girlfriend would not get him. But even for the sake of this, Lu could no longer drink. He felt like a wine barrel which was about to burst from overflow and fermentation. People around began to overlap, they say. Do not believe the new hero who pretends. Suddenly, Kamid Yu and his company entered the festive hall, which told everyone to immediately stop dinner. Going closer to Lu, he directly stated that the guy was not a real hero since he was born a traitor. At that moment, Lu barely restrained himself. Besides, the heaviness after alcohol prevented him from moving.